Today, I gave myself a challenge to talk about key moments in 20th century history and 21st century history, to do it all in a few minutes, to do it all through one song, and to provide a twist at the end. And that epic song is Nature Boy.
There was a boy, a very strange, enchanted boy. They say he wandered very far over land and sea.
There was a boy, very strange, enchanted boy. That song, it's probably the most performed and covered song in the history of recorded music. I'm talking about the most legendary singers: Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, Frank Sinatra, Ray Charles, James Brown, David Bowie, and in more recent times, Celine Dion and Tony Bennett with Lady Gaga, Aurora. And in 2024, Art Garfunkel, when he put out an album with his son. And it all started with Nat King Cole. And I said that we could talk about the 20th century and the 21st century through that song. Well, when it comes to Nat King Cole, we can talk about the civil rights movement. I mean, here he was a star. He had started with his jazz ensemble. It was the only black act represented by Capitol Records at the time. And he became a superstar with Nature Boy. And yet, he couldn't check into hotels in the South, Jim Crow laws. He suffered constant racism.
And then one day, a magic day, he passed my way. And while we spoke of many things, fools and kings, this he said to me: the greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return.
And who wrote that song? Who wrote that song that's been entertaining and haunting us for almost a century? Was it a famous songwriter? Nope. It was a guy by the name of Eden Ahbez. Now, this Eden, who comes up with this love message, he's part of what they call nature boys. Who are these nature boys? Experts will tell you that they were proto-hippies. What does that mean? It means hippies before hippies. The hippies in the 1960s, we know what they did. They changed the world. They were in the anti-war movement, anti-Vietnam movement. Woodstock, they changed the nature of music, acid rock. And the pre-hippie movement was called Nature Boys. It was just a handful of people, and Eden was one of them. And at the time, he was living barefoot in a tent, bearded, long hair, under the Hollywood sign. And in a sense, metaphorically speaking, that was appropriate because Eden had been abandoned by his parents, grew up in an orphanage, and left New York, where he was born, and made his way to California. And the people who founded Hollywood, they were all immigrant Jews or children of immigrant Jews. And they were all Jews fleeing persecution in Eastern Europe and Germany. They came to America with a dream. They thought America was a place where the little guy could make it to the top. He can marry the boss's daughter because love conquers all. But when they got to America, they found that it was an elitist place. It wasn't the America of their dreams. It was a place where the little guy had to know his place. He couldn't even look at the boss's daughter. He couldn't join the country club. He couldn't practice medicine. Jews had to start their own hospitals. So the little guy couldn't think that love conquers all. Love conquers nothing. Know your place. So what did the people who became the future moguls do? They left New York, they left the East Coast, they went as far west from the American elite as they could, and they created factories, dream factories, factories for their dreams. An America where the little guy could make it to the top, where he could marry the boss's daughter, where love conquers all. They called it Hollywood. And Eden was living under the sign. It's ironic, but it's also mysterious because I understand the Hollywood moguls. They went through that stuff, or their parents went through that stuff. But Eden, he grew up in an orphanage. To best of my knowledge, he didn't even study music. What is it that made him capable of reaching into his soul and touching all of our souls? As it turns out, nothing. He ripped off the song. Maybe he did it unconsciously because he wrote the words, and they're beautiful words, and he claimed that he heard the music in a dream, but he really took it from the guy who lived that life, who was a very strange and enchanted boy, who crossed the ocean, came to America, and his name was Herman, aka Chaim Yablokov. Herman Yablokov? Who's he? Never heard of him. Well, he was a big star in Yiddish theater in New York in the 1930s and 20s. And what's a Yiddish theater? Well, it's theater in the Yiddish language. What's Yiddish language? It's the language of the immigrant Jews at the turn of the century to New York. It's a kind of Germanic Hebraic language that Eastern European Jews spoke. An entire culture, millions of people spoke that language. Of course, it pretty much disappeared after the Nazis murdered most of European Jewry. But at the time in New York, it was a center of Yiddish theater, and I'm proud to say that Yiddish theater started in my parents' hometown in Iași, Romania, where a guy named Abraham Goldfagen started the Yiddish theater. Why should you care? Because Yiddish theater migrated to New York, it morphed into Broadway, and it became Hollywood. So you've been watching Yiddish theater in translation, in a sense, when you watch a Hollywood movie. It has its origins in Yiddish theater. And parallel with that was Yiddish song, because a lot of these were musicals. And Yablokov was a big star in Yiddish theater, and he wrote a big hit called Cigarettes, because just before he came to America, he had been through a pogrom, and he watched these Jewish orphans selling cigarettes in Grodno for their life. They had to sell the cigarettes to make enough money to eat. So when he came to America, he wrote this song called Cigarettes. And he also wrote another song that came out of the pogrom, the Jew murdering experience. And that was called Hush My Heart.
Zeig mein Herz, rutsch das Leben ist mir finster schwarz. Doch dein Wehzeug muss verborgen sein, schlingt herab dem Pein. Meine Größe Leiden zeigt nicht vor der Welt. Dein Gewinn wird doch sei wie keiner nicht verstehen. Tränen sei verstehen erst mit dein Zar, sei du nah verstellt.
It was a song about a guy like him who was haunted and enchanted and crossed the waters and got to America. And in a way, he achieved the American dream, like him. He had a wife, he had kids. He should have been happy, but he spoke to his heart. He said, hush my heart, because the heart was unhappy. He was what we would call today post-trauma. He couldn't get the experience of Jew hatred out of his heart. So he said, put on a smile, fake it. So I guess in that orphanage where Eden grew up, because Eden grew up in a Jewish orphanage in New York because his father that abandoned him had been Jewish. And Eden must have heard it. So consciously or unconsciously, He ripped off the melody, but not the words. In his version, the hero, the enchanted boy, the haunted boy, he comes with a message. And the message is not to fake it. The message is all you need is love. And out of that experience of persecution and hatred, suddenly we have the anthem of love for the 20th and maybe the 21st century.
There was a boy, a very strange, enchanted boy. They say he wandered very far over land and sea. A little shy and sad of eye, but very wise was he.
Magic day passed my way. As we spoke of many things, fools and kings, this he said to me: the greatest thing you could ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. The greatest thing you could ever learn is just to love